Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to give everybody a chance to log in. So we'll start at 5 past. Thank you. Right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again today. Point on order, just with regards to the session. We will just mute all of the participants, specifically for the presentation section. And if you've got any questions, please do feel free to pop them in the Q&A chat. But we will also today enable the microphones after the how can I say, just dealing with the Q&A section, just so that we can have a little bit more of a free form discussion. Hopefully it'll give us a chance to then just deal with some of the other questions or specific key themes that we haven't talked to today. So what I'll do is just share the slide deck from my side. We just have a few slides because I think for us it was more important to give everybody a chance just to engage with us on some of these things. A few issues that we just want to highlight, so those I've covered in the slide deck as well. Sorry, I'm just waiting for it to load. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can see that on your side. There we go. Right. So I think in terms of the discussion topics that we just wanted to cover today, there are a few challenges that we've picked up with submissions coming in this week. We just wanted to talk through that. I think some of the particulars that stood out is just the application folder name, where we want to ensure that the application folder is named correctly, reverting back to the old naming convention. For the XML trigger files, a few issues. There's either missing information or there are places where mandatory information wasn't included. And I think to note and also communicate that we have picked up an error on the XML trigger file that we had placed on the website. So also just a note to everyone to please access the ECTD website and download the new version of the XML trigger file, just so we can ensure that the formula error that we had is corrected when you do your submission. Just also, I think from my side, there is an email that has been shared from HPA side, just requesting you to confirm your CIPC details. This you would note, it's also part of the XML trigger file, and specifically it will help us to link our health products to the registered legal entities. I think in my explanation to one of the applicants, I just clarified the reason for that is with the submissions coming in and this, kind of like being a free text field, we've had instances that has pulled through to our database where, for instance, a company is called Company X, Pty Ltd, that the way that that is captured also by some of the guys that prepare the files for submission, it reflects then on our side as Company X, Pty Ltd, no parentheses, or Company X, parentheses, Pty, parentheses, Ltd, full stop, or Company X, parentheses, Pty, parentheses, Ltd, no full stop. And as a result, the system then sees that as three distinct entries, and we then have this really user-unfriendly database that we do need to try and clean up. And I think going forward, that will also then be the field that we would refer to and link to, so that we know that the CIPC number, which is a unique identifier, we can then anchor in our system. And this is particularly why we then asked for that information to be furnished through to HPA. So if you could kindly assist us to collect that data whilst we are busy also doing our master data cleanse. Then there was some feedback on some key Q&A themes that we've picked up a couple of questions or queries or submissions that have come through the ECTD queries website email address. And I think this is important for us maybe just to tackle. I know that we are only going live with this on the 1st of October, and certainly there will be many more discussions from now until then. But I think some key things that we picked up that we just wanted to talk to today, and then confirm that the comprehensive updated Q&A document will be reshared on the 30th of April, where we then incorporate and include a number of the questions that was asked on email, as well as in the sessions with the relevant responses. Also, just a quick one, there were a few questions around the SAHPRA portal and the guideline for the portal and when training will be available. So we have the new portal that replaces SFTP that is planned for the 1st of July. So we will ensure that we arrange for training and induction sessions. I think at this point we are aiming to do this during June. So we'll also have 2 or 3 sessions so that we can cover that. But the intention of the portal will be to facilitate application process and then the submissions of the different documents, folders, etc. We're starting with health product registrations, and we'll be moving on to other SAHPRA business processes as well. The portal will help us to collect metadata, which is required for that automated trigger file. And we will also have communication running through the portal back and forth between SAHPRA and the stakeholders, being then either applicants or anybody that has got a specific business-related inquiry. We intend to have one, I would say, account administrator per applicant, and that individual will be typically the responsible authorized person. And they will also be responsible for then adding the other multiple business user accounts and also then deactivating old users. So I think historically this has been a problem on one of the portals where if an old user left and that account was then deactivated, that you would lose all of the transactions linked to the individual. And the way that we are structuring the account administration now, it will be per legal entity or I would say juristic person. And therefore, all of the business-related users then can be added and administered at a company level. Right, so just to loop back to some of the current challenges that we've picked up. So for the application folder name, we would like to ask, please, for application folders to just be the application number and not the registration number. That must be the way that you then name your folders before you drop them onto SFTP for us. Also, please do use the application number for the first strength so that we are able to aggregate the information into the right master folder on our side. For the XML trigger files, so I think this process has gone quite well. There are, however, a few challenges, a few of the applicants that have experienced some issues. And we just wanted to flag 4 things with regards to that. So firstly, we just need to stress that mandatory fields are mandatory. Please provide the information in those specific fields. Otherwise, we will have these trigger files and the application upload process fail. And that means that we have to rerun it, and you will have to then resubmit the completed XML trigger file. I think for related sequences, we just wanted to note that that we want the first number or the number in the related sequence must please be the first sequence number in the bundle of be 0000 because the initial application actually relates to itself. And for post-registration, where we have responses coming through, the related sequence will always refer back to the initial sequence number for the variation that you submitted. So I hope that gives a little bit of clarity. I think if that's still unclear, please feel free to just let us know. I can maybe also ask one of the colleagues from Vector to elucidate. Because of the software that we are now using, we no longer require actually the validation report. However, it's important for you to keep that and retain that, and it should be available on request. If there are errors that we pick up and we need to just cross-check that with you, we might come back and ask you then to share that with us. But it's not required to be submitted in the application folder. And the same then with the signed MD5 checksum. This is also no longer required. The software that we are using then runs this and authenticates this from our side. Right, and then some of the key Q&A topics that we've picked up on that we just wanted to flight. So for the transfer of applicancy process, again, just to note, as we captured it in the updated guidelines, which is the ECTD 3.0, this is effective then 1st of October, but it will be applicable then to the company seeding as well as acquiring the product from then the 1st of October. So for current transfer of applicancies from an applicant, these baselines by the current acquiring applicant, the baselines must be submitted in an ECTD format. And I think for TOAs, historically, we have had those type 2s come through as ECTD. And this is applicable actually for our current scenario, where we have the acquiring applicant submitting those type 2 transfer of applicancy requests. Submission combinations for variations, that's also documented in the ECTD 3.0 guideline. Again, effective only from 1 October 2024. What we wanted to flag here is just that we'll have a further workshop on this specific topic, as there's been a number of questions from applicants received on this, just for clarity around how things can be grouped, how we would work with the interrelated variations that will be submitted, being then that there may be some type 2, type 1A ends that need to come in together. And we needed to create further clarity around how this will be managed from a systems perspective. Of course, I think the way that we've captured at the moment, it talks to how these data packets need to be submitted to SAHPRA in order for us to then manage this from a workflow routing, as there is automated workflow routing. And these specific then variation type 1A, type 1B, type 2s then get routed internally through system processes. So in order for us to manage that effectively and also manage the timeline and the KPI calculations around this, it's required that we now start cleaning up the system processing around this in order for us to track it and also report on it. But as I said, I think a more detailed discussion will be required for this. So we will be setting this up for round about mid-May, so that we can also then create that clarity as we ramp up for that 1st of October change. Then also just to confirm the final versions of the guideline, basically then being published in the new SAHPRA format. This is targeted for May. We will be putting those on the main SAHPRA website as well as then on the SAHPRA ECTD site. Content-wise, there is no significant changes expected in terms of the content that has been published in these guideline specifications. And I think the question around whether or not service providers and applicants can start using the content, the answer then is yes. So it really is just the format of the document that will be put into the new SAHPRA RIMS format. Then just to point out the section that deals with the technical files on the ECTD website. These technical files are ready for vendor use. And I think what we also need to point out is that they are fixed points on the website for vendors to look up information against. So it is advisable that the vendors then try and read the content from these fixed point lists. And this is to accommodate seamless future changes and updates, as these may occur from time to time as we also evolve our business processes and also next few months. So as opposed to downloading the list and saving it somewhere else and then not being able to refer to the most current list, it is perhaps advisable then for the software vendors to read directly from the lists as they are available on the site. Right, and then just another one that came up was around baselines. So to submit baselines, applicants with open variations will need to then withdraw those open variations and submit baseline sequence 0000, and then the variation as a sequence. As is the case with anybody that is submitting now a variation where the baseline in ECTD has not yet been received. And another important point is just that we would want to take those baselines in when a variation is submitted. We do not want baselines to come in on its own, and primarily that is because we are not reviewing baselines. And I think that kind of was it from my side. So very high level. And what I can do maybe now is just check if we've got any questions on the Q&A side. If not, then I think we can do hands and just run through questions and answers. Let me just open up our Q&A page.
It's Madeleine.
Yes,
just
Madeleine.
Before you continue, I just want to make a note on the CIPC numbers. So yesterday we went through a few trigger files, and some applicants are putting spaces between the characters, and obviously when you put a space, it picks up as a different company. So please just be consistent within one company. If you use spaces, use it, but if everybody can in one company just do the same thing, that will also be very helpful.
Stuff. Thanks, Madeleine. So I think I'm just trying to scroll down and just have a look at some of the questions that have come through.
I think there's also some, I just want to, because I was the one with the related sequences of what we.
Viola, do you want to unmute yourself and then try? Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Christiana. Sorry. So my question is around a response to recommendations that needs to be submitted, and it's pertaining a sequence that was submitted in the old system. So now, in terms of how do I then reference that? Because the previous sequence, it's not. Will it reflect on here on this new system when I'm linking the two, the response which I'm submitting now in the new submission portal? Thank you. I hope that's clear.
Thanks for your So I'm going to ask Madeleine to help me out on that, because I'm also still learning the system.
Yes, no, that's fine. Viola, so we have, when the data was migrated to the new system, we updated all the sequence numbers, the related sequence number, to reflect itself if it was the initial submission, initial sequence of the submission. So you can only, if you reference, for instance, you submitted it in sequence 0004, 0005, you just use that same sequence number that was the initial sequence number, and I'm talking about the related sequence number. Not the sequence number itself. The sequence number itself is what you're going to submit. So that related sequence number, you use the 0004 or 5 wherever you submitted the initial sequence.
Okay. Thank you. That answers me. Thank you.
Just also on that note, we've also seen some applicants, the sequence number is 000 and the related sequence is 0001. That is absolutely impossible in the ECTD life cycle. So it should at least be itself or something, a higher number. So 0 can't relate to 1, 0 should relate to 0 at least. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Madeleine. Then I've got a hand from Esther. Sorry, I'm not focusing. Let me just
Can you hear me?
yes, apologies, yes.
Just a quick question. On the 16th, when we were uploading the sequences, we could notice that the XML and the sequence are being pulled within 5 to 10 minutes. And then since then, all the sequences and the XMLs that were uploaded after that, they're still there. So I just wanted to know, was it just that a trial or is there something wrong with the system?
Thanks, Esther. So indeed, the processing should be, you would typically see it runs in the background. I think we've set it at the moment for every 15 minutes. But at the moment, it's got a longer run time. We are busy with just some of the data structure and the data cleansing. So it runs, we will execute that now at a day end. But the intention would be to run that in the automated way, and you would start getting your messages and your responses come through every 15 minutes. I think that I could maybe just check with Kent when we envisage that would start running every 15 minutes, but probably by the end of the month, we should be in a position where it then runs at a lot shorter intervals. It's just that at the moment, as we are still busy settling the system down, it's running only at day end. Kent, I don't know if you want to maybe just comment on that.
Yeah, but you're right. It is supposed to go every 15 minutes.
Yep.
And we will put it back on the 15-minute track. But what we saw in the first day on Tuesday as this was running, probably over 90% of the trigger files were not filled out correctly. They had some incorrect syntax. Part of that syntax did come from the template. Should point that out. And the new template that is on the website, everybody should download that. We will be putting it back on there once we start seeing a consistent, correct from industry providing it. As if you are not using the new template and something comes in and it does malfunction, it basically your sequence will go into a status of failed at screening. Right now, though, we've been fixing a lot of the problems that the industry is having, trying to keep at least the process going. And so it's taking a little bit longer just because we're spending a little bit more time. We're spending a little bit more time on trying to help you guys in the fact that, okay, there's a small mix up here and a small mix up there. Let's fix this so that the application gets processed. But in order to do that, we've had to turn the automatic checker off, and the scheduler will be turned on. We're hoping before the end of the month. And it just is a matter of seeing what is the quality of the trigger files that are being provided to us. Eventually, once it gets to a point where the majority of the trigger files are coming through without any problems whatsoever, we'll turn it back on. And what will happen is that if you, by that time, haven't figured out how to put the trigger file together, then you're simply just going to get automatically rejected and you'll have to resubmit.
Kent, maybe just on that point, so I think what would be also interesting to know from the colleagues that have submitted earlier this week, if they've been receiving their automated messages. So that is perhaps something that the colleagues can just indicate in the chat as well, just for a point of curiosity. Then I think if we can take hand from Gita.
Hi, Kristalna, can you hear me? Kristalna?
Hi, Gita, you can go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, good. So I have actually 3 questions, and maybe the first question, something very similar to what we were actually asked. We actually have a recommendation that was provided in our e-submission. So that e-submission is not in ECTD. how would we go about making that response to that submission? If I can just get your guidance on if it has to be ECTD, then what is the process there? Because there isn't a baseline and it is a response to a recommendation. And specifically, this is related to label change. Then, if Christella, do you want me to pause here and then take that question before I go to the next?
Yeah, let's maybe do that. So I just want to understand, Gita, you this was a response that was due over the freeze period or post the freeze period?
It was due during the freeze period. Obviously, we couldn't make that submission. Now we need to respond. Yeah.
Okay, so Gita, as I have it, can just double check with Symphony on this. What we had indicated is the responses that were due over the freeze period, where we had sent the query prior the freeze period. That those ones we are going to facilitate receiving the e-submission response, but it is case by case and query by query on that basis that we are managing it. So for the ones that was communicated to applicants before we went into freeze, we will facilitate from Santani's perspective, we've had this discussion, we will facilitate that e-submission to come back. And then for anything that was communicated during or after the freeze period, we would need that to come in baseline and then the variation response as a sequence.
Okay, that's clear. Just in terms of the baseline, since the baseline is only the approved sections that was approved by SAHPRA,
it's a full baseline and it must be then up to date.
Okay. And in terms of critical label updates, if we do have critical label updates, it doesn't obviously involve module 3, but they are an e-submission. Would we have to request a specific approval from SAHPRA to allow an e-submission if it's critical, or would we have to convert that and do the baseline first and then that label update?
Yeah, we would need that ECTD baseline to come in within, if that is a variation, within the variation as a sequence to the baseline.
Okay, thanks, Christelna. You've
Thank
answered
you.
my questions.
Good stuff. Thanks, Gita. I just want to double check. Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. Let me then move to our next hand, which is then Lorraine.
Hi, Christelna. Thank you so much. Actually, my question was similar to what Gita has asked, but in this case, it was not a recommendation. It was simply a variation that needed to be submitted post the freeze. So if I'm hearing you correctly, would have to first do it in a baseline format and then add the variations that we would like to submit. Is that correct?
Hi, Lorraine. Yes. So the baseline would then be our 0000, and the variation would then be 0001.
Okay, that's fine. And then just one last question regarding the PITE. How would that work? Would that also need to be submitted using the XML file, or how does it work with the post-importation testing?
So, Lorraine, no, the post-importation testing exemption request that is managed and reviewed by the inspectorate doesn't need the trigger XML file. We will, I think, as we move along and we start to gear up for that 1st of October, some of these submissions will start also coming into the dossiers as we then try and complete all of the activities that relate to a specific product. within then that, let's call it document management framework. But this is something that I think we can discuss and certainly spend a bit more time on hashing out some of the details. But for now, you just follow the normal process to upload those on the SFTP and then communicating via email to the responsible department so that they can then collect the information that they need to review within the inspectorate.
Oh, okay. Thanks for that. And sorry, just last question. Are there any special circumstances where you would allow any e-submissions to be made before being converted to the baseline? Let's say if they are stock impacting, is there no any leeway or grace period that can be provided
So I think
for
what
those?
we have, what
Mhm.
we've assessed is just the time that it would then take to update the current CTD in its e-submission format to an eCTD. Typically, it should be, I think, let's say about a week. So we would really strongly urge colleagues to progress with that as rapidly as they can to minimize stock impact. But the requirement from our side is that these submissions will now need to come in eCTD.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your responses. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Then let me move through to Kensani.
Thank you, Christelle. Now, I have a quick question. So on Tuesday, I downloaded the trigger file from SAHPRA website. I completed that and did my submission via FTP as an eCTD submission. After that submission, I did not get the report, which when you explained in the previous lessons that we were going to get after submitting both the application and together with the envelope that we create using the notepad. I then proceeded to submit 2 other applications just to test if it was an error, not receiving the outcome report from SAHPRA, but I still got the same outcome. There was no report from SAHPRA. This afternoon, sorry about that. Yesterday, I then reached out to SAHPRA to ask what the problem was, and I was informed that my sequence type was not populated on the trigger file that I had used. And I was informed that the trigger file that I had used, which I got on Tuesday from the SAHPRA website, had been updated. So I used version 1.1. And then when I went back, now it was version 1.2. I populated that today. I did that whole notepad process, submitted my application to SAHPRA, followed by my XML file. I still haven't received my report. So I just want to know, is there something wrong that I'm doing, or is it a system error?
Thanks, Kensani. So thank you for raising that question. In fact, yes, Santini did share the inquiry with us, and we have had a look at the trigger XML file that came along with your submission. I think there were, as you said, this problem that was picked up. And again, just for everybody on the call, sincere apologies for the issue with the trigger XML file, and please do just use then the new version for that one that's been uploaded. But I think I can maybe just ask Ken, so seeing as that we're not running this every 15 minutes, Kensani, if you've done that during the course of this morning, it may be that the automatic fetch of the file and that report back that you need to get will only kick off this afternoon. As indicated, the intention would definitely be for this to be by the end of the month back to its normal 15-minute interval. But just due to the guys manually fixing and moving some of the things along whilst we are washing out the old XML files that we've received before, it may then just take a little bit longer. Kent, I don't know if you want to maybe just comment. Hopefully I've captured that correctly.
No, it's perfect. And it could be, I mean, if you got the feedback that you didn't do the submission type, it could very well be that you're not necessarily noticing that there is a drop down that needs to be filled in at the submission part. Because that if we do come across things where people have not filled in the mandatory fields that are indicated in red in the file, then they go into a failed folder. And so the failed folder, then we send the screenshots on and then the applicant should be getting notified that it didn't pass and that they need to redo it because the trigger files were invalid. So as it is a manual process, it could take a little bit of time. I'm not sure if the ones from today have been processed yet. I think that they're scheduled to be processed towards the end of the business day.
Okay, that's noted, and thanks for that, Kent. And just also a comment. So with the drop-down functions on the XML files, they were working fine from my side.
Okay.
So that's why I actually raised that query with SAHPRA. Just a quick question as well, just for clarity. So this is a new application for registration. The 0000 was submitted before the freeze period by SAHPRA. And we've actually had subsequent outcomes for some of these applications that I'm submitting responses for. And now this is one of the responses that I'm submitting still for the new application. I just want to make sure for my own understanding, I do not need to resubmit the 0000 because it was submitted in ECTD initially. Am I correct in my understanding?
Yes, that's perfectly
Okay.
correct, because we would have migrated the previous ECTDs and some of the e-submissions into the new environment. So the only important thing is just to make sure that we capture the correct related sequence number.
Okay, awesome. And just one last query. So all variations going forward, there's no more ECTD. There's no more e-submission. Everything has to be ECTD, but I first need to submit a baseline in ECTD, right?
Yes, Kinsonia. So
Okay.
all of the variations must also be ECTD. If you have submitted a baseline before, then obviously we just need that variation to come in as a submission.
Okay.
But if you haven't yet submitted the baseline, then please do so.
Okay, noted. Thank you so much.
Great stuff. Thank you. And then I've got a hand up from Kirsten.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Christelna, colleagues. Question relates to the building of baselines. Our understanding is that we cannot submit the baseline if there's pending variations. So the question is, do we wait for the pending type 2s that were submitted, e-submission, prior to building the baseline? Or do we submit the baseline and then resubmit those pending type 2s as sequence 1?
Thanks, Kirsten. So I think did I mention that on the slide now? I think so. So for any baseline that must come in where there is a pending variation, you would need to either wait until the pending variation has been completed and then provide the fully updated ECTD baseline. However, I think in the slide I did mention that what we would recommend is that you rather withdraw the variations that's still open and pending, prepare then the updated baseline as it stands, and then submit the relevant variation as a sequence. So I'm how can I say, I'm not in a position to advise in terms of where your variation is at the moment from it's almost complete or it's not quite there, or, you've just submitted it. So therefore it would be advisable to rather withdraw and then just do the baseline as well as the variation. I think you would probably have a better sense than I do in terms of how close this is to being finalized, or how, shall I say, when it was submitted. But that would then be the route that we recommend. So for the baseline to come in with the variation, ensuring that the previous open variations are then withdrawn. Hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Christelna.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you. And then a hand from Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm sorry for the delay.
No stress.
I'm just very concerned about this requirement to resubmit variations that may be in the system that are still pending, because in many cases they weren't on the variations portal or in the variations tracker, and it's difficult for us to know where these variations are. And, is there no way that any summary can be provided of variations that need to be resubmitted? Because we would happily be thinking that they were perhaps close to being finalized, and they may not be. Is there any way that this can be sort of tightened up so that we know which variations are not going to be progressed from ECTD?
So, okay, I'm not exactly sure I understand the last part of the question, but basically, I think for any submissions that you have with variations where you need to submit another variation, it would be something that we would want to ask on a case-by-case basis. If you have got an inquiry about the status of a particular variation, please then do reach out to us via email so that we can advise where that particular variation is, and you then to be able to gauge whether or not you would like to rather withdraw, prepare then a baseline, and then resubmit that variation, or if you are waiting until that variation is then completed its evaluation process. I don't know if,
sorry,
yeah.
would I be correct then in saying that you will be progressing those ones that were submitted in ECTD, but it may not be closed yet? You will be progressing them anyway.
Yes, no, absolutely. So anything that is with us that was work in progress, the units will be progressing those and closing those off. And the same also applies to the variations that was submitted before the freeze in the DVP. The internal colleagues will be reviewing those, processing those, and then updating on the DVP. We are just not taking any new applications or submissions in via DVP, but DVP itself will be available for, I think specifically for colleagues where they need to download those variation summaries, that remains accessible, and the information can be retrieved from there. But anything that was work in progress, we are going to be finishing that off.
Okay, that's perfect. I wasn't quite sure that I'd understood the slide that you were talking about withdrawing variations and resubmitting.
Apologies.
What the criteria would be for having to do that.
Yes, no, apologies. Thank you for asking the question, so we just have an opportunity to clarify.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Good. Then I think we've got a next hand from Taylor.
Yes, hi Christelna, thank you. I just have two questions, one question and then one just confirmation. When I'm trying to log into the FTP, I'm receiving a warning that says there's a potential security breach and that there's a new South Africa host key. So I'm not too sure if I should be updating it, or if I do see somebody else was experiencing that as well.
Taylor, tell me, was that this morning?
Yes, this morning and still now when I'm trying to log in. I have like completely closed the FTP and then I've reopened it, but I'm still receiving the same warning.
Thanks for just pointing that out. We did have an issue earlier today, and as a result, the server had been restarted. So we were experiencing a problem where the firewall had lost trust with that server. I will just ask my IT colleague to touch base with the hosting environment with the colleague so that we can just ensure that trust relationship gets reestablished ASAP. If I may then just ask your indulgence so that we can try and resolve that this afternoon. But that basically is the challenge that we had this morning. I'm so sorry. I was under the impression that we had resolved it. It seems that we haven't. Thanks for advising.
Sure, no problem. Thank you. And then just a second clarification on the trigger file. For the optional sections, if we don't fill anything in the optional, like the PMF number or the VAMP number, can we leave those rows blank, or do we have to delete them?
No, please just leave them blank.
Okay,
If there's no information, you can just blank it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then I've got another hand from Fiona.
Great. Thanks, Kristalna. Thank you for taking my question. I think Geeta had a similar question, but I didn't quite understand your response. It's about a dossier that is not yet converted into ECTD. I received a clinical recommendation during the freeze period. So I'm trying to understand the original submission with the clinical documents. Do I put that in with the 0001 together with my response to the clinical recommendation, or do I put that original submission in with the baseline? Because it's not yet approved.
Yeah, so Fiona, if again, just from a time perspective, you said the responses came through during the freeze.
Yes.
Okay, so these ones that were processed during the freeze, prior to freeze, we will ask please that you prepare the ECTD baseline and then the response as a sequence. But I wonder if I mustn't maybe just capture a note. As I've said earlier, I do need to just confirm which are the ones that was on the list prior and post freeze, because there was individual communication that went out to applicants that were obviously expected to do their responses during the freeze, where we've made this arrangement to say that those ones that were expected before or during freeze, we would then accommodate receiving that as an e-submission. I do just need to check and confirm if actually your organization was on the list. Can I maybe just make a note and then come back to you via email?
Yes, sure, no problem. Shall I send you an email?
Yes, you are welcome
With the
to do
details?
that. Please,
Okay, cool.
please
I'll
do
do
that,
that.
and then I can revert to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
All righty. Then I've got a hand from Ingrid.
I have two questions, if I may ask it. Sorry, the one I think is a stupid question, but I'm very confused. If we have a e-submission clinical that was submitted in June 2023, obviously it would have been in the queue now and hoping to get an outcome at the soonest. Let's say we get a recommendation, and this is where I get confused. Can we then submit the baseline as 0000 and then the response to the recommendation as 0001? I just want to confirm that because I'm not sure about that. I understood that you have to, there should be no pending variation to do the baseline, but yeah, if you can clarify that for me first, please.
Thanks, Ingrid. Fair point. So the baseline would be then for the dossier. It was up to date until the query was sent through, and then the response is in fact in 0001.
Okay, so we can do then. It's technically, if I understand it correctly, you still have that one variation that will be open. So we don't have to pull that variation to. I mean, we've to lose that 9 months in the queue already. So okay, so that makes sense. Thank you. And then the second question is hopefully easy question. This relates to products already in ECTD format. That was submitted. I can use an example on the 20th of March, just before the freeze. To rush, it was actually a recommendation just to rush to get it in the system to be reviewed. It was urgent. However, we received feedback from SAHPRA that those last minute submissions, if I can say it like that, still needs to be transferred to the new system. So obviously we don't have the XML trigger file yet, but it is an ECTD. So my question is, when can we expect those submissions to be transferred to the system in order to be recognized by the relevant clinical units so that it can be reviewed? I think that's the question, if it makes sense.
Thanks, Ingrid. So just again, it's a new submission. It wasn't a variation.
No, it's a response to a recommendation. So it's post-reg, already registered everything. It was literally just to finalize the last clinical recommendation.
Okay, all right. So for post registration, if then the advice at this point is that submissions are being migrated, I will then just double check for you specifically if those have been pulled across. We have completed the migration for all of our new applications and then for all of the post reg, as far as I know. But if there's something outstanding for you, if you could also just pop me a mail with that particular application and sequence related information, so I can double check that. But as we have it at the moment, yeah, all of the ECDs are have happily been carted across. So if something's missing, I would definitely check that for you.
Thank you, Kristalna.
Shops. Then I've got a hand from Charlene. Can I ask, Charlene, before you go, I see we've got quite a number of hands from the other colleagues. I think we will try and stretch the session maybe just for a few extra minutes at the end. But anybody that we might not get to, please just remember to pop your question in the Q&A section. So even if we can't take your hand now, that we just record your question and make sure that we then revert on that. Right, Charlene, over to you.
Thanks, Priscilla. And I seem to be laboring on this point, so I do apologize, but it's seriously for confirmation on how to move forward in the new system. So to Ingrid's query on having a clinical submission that was submitted before, and now that you need to do a baseline, right? And say, for example, you don't have a recommendation on the clinical, but you need to move forward with the baseline because it's halting doing CMC variations going forward. How do you move forward in this instance, knowing that you're not supposed to have something pending at SAHPRA previously? So CMC will be fine. I can acknowledge that you have to have CMC variations approved before you move to baseline. But when it comes to clinical, are we allowed to create a baseline with the clinical variation included and then submit CMC variations going forward?
Charlene, I'm actually not sure how to answer that question. And I wonder, it is perhaps something that specific nuance, if I can get clarity from our internal processing team as to how we need to deal with this and want to see this. I wonder, Kent, I don't know if you, Madeleine, can maybe assist with guidance there. I can hear Kent is feverishly typing away. Yeah.
No, Madeleine, you can go ahead and take that.
Kristalna, I think this is a question for your internal team mostly.
Yeah.
From a regulatory perspective, I do understand the how can I say the issue with it.
Yeah.
Also, seeing that it's a clinicals tend to be if it's minor, I think, and this is maybe a suggestion, is that if it was a minor correction or it's not an indication change, yes, you can probably submit it in the baseline because then it would be fix the spelling error or fix this line as a response. That would be a response. But if it's something like indication which has clinical and stuff like that, I won't put it in. So I think it would be conditional in terms of that. And but it's obviously things we have to discuss with your internal team.
Yeah, and I think it is a bit of a tricky one, specifically because we do not want any change to be in the baseline itself. I mean, it must be a clean, fully up-to-date baseline. But I think in terms of how we sequence then those different steps to get to a positive result is a different story. So I think, gosh, Charlene, I think we will have to discuss that with the guys, apply ourselves a little bit and then revert back to you as soon as possible. If you perhaps have an example that you might be able to share via email, that certainly would help us steer the discussion to then get to a decision. And again, if that is something that affects a number of colleagues, I'm happy also just to do a separate little industry communication note so we can close that particular issue off. It sounds like, I mean, it's been raised by a few of the colleagues, so we do need to then just granulate that.
Sure. Thank you, Christina and Madeleine. I will share a query with you. It is common, and I think you're going to find it with a lot of applicants
Yeah.
because of the time it takes for clinical to feedback.
Yeah.
And I don't want to impact CMC. So
Yeah.
I will share the email with you. Thank you.
Thanks. That's very helpful. Thank you for raising that, and definitely then one we'll discuss urgently and get back to everybody on. Right. So I think maybe let me take 3 more hands, and then colleagues, I think we'll have to close. So if I can take Connie and then Desiree and then Jane.
Thanks, Christina. 2 of my other queries have been responded, especially the ones where we need to know when to withdraw and then resubmit. My last ask, I don't know if it will just be me. I posted it on the chat as well that I think maybe as pharmacists we might need to do an IT course for this. And is it possible that maybe Madeleine or Kent have a training session? Because if now this is reliant on external service providers, it's going to be incurring additional costs to applicants, especially the small applicants that are small and medium enterprises, because already they need to have licenses for ECTD, and then now they have to go through training. Because for me, all these questions, listening to all these questions, I think we really do need training as done by SAHPRA, because you know the system better than probably a service provider that did not work on building the system. That is just an ask from myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. I think just for me to then just understand the requirement, if we need to do training, can I just get an understanding? We need training on what exactly? Because that will allow me to then bring in the right people to support training endeavors.
You know, it's on these questions because like now we post on the chat and then you respond, and sometimes it's easier to have on a one-on-one, like I know you are doing these webinars, but can it be formalized that we address how to do this and people test it and then come back and be able to ask these questions on a formal training session. I don't know, or on a webinar or whatever, workshop or whatever that is, could be organized. And maybe it's just me that struggle with these things because my IT is extremely bad.
Yeah, so Connie, I think maybe then if you could also just share communication around what IT elements you are having challenges with, and where you would need a little bit of extra guidance or support. I think that would maybe make it a bit clearer for me in terms of the requirement and the ask, so that we can then try and address that. But yeah, I mean, I think with the Trigger XML, we did have, I would like to think, a really good training session with the colleagues. So we have also made that little video available on the website. And if, yeah, I mean, I think those from an IT perspective, as well as then the SFTP, how to save the file on SFTP is covered in the little video. But if there's topics outside of that from a ICT perspective that we're struggling with, yeah, please just pop those on an email and we will see how we can assist.
Oh, thank you so much. If maybe we could know where to pose them, and especially when you're busy with it and then it gets to be addressed immediately. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And then Desiree?
Thank you, Christina. I have 3 questions, but I'll be quick. First of all, can I just confirm the following will be the submission will be the same as previous. So that would be like CPP requests, import permits, Section 36 product alerts, and once-off batch exemptions. Would they be submitted now in a new process, or can we take it that they can be submitted as per previously submitted?
Yeah, so Desiree, those all run through the normal process. So, you know, before we made any changes to the ECTD and the registration and variation processes, all of those other ones would run their old way. However, we are looking to digitize those in the new portal, but it is something that we'll have to do in phases because, of course, all of these fancy things we want to do is funding dependent. So the first things that we're running through the portal is the health applications process, which will be for new renewal and variations. And then we are looking to upgrade the Section 21 process. And the next one that we've got on the wish list is for licensing, being the new renewal and amendment. And thereafter, all of the other business processes, like, for instance, Section 36 applications or CPP requests, etc., those will come over time, but run through the portal, not in the process that we're describing at the moment. So I hope that clarifies.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. My second question is site master file submissions. So previously we were doing it directly to the unit. Would it now be through the SFTP with an email to the unit? Is that the correct process?
Yeah, so we've got site master files on for ECTD 3.0. So that will start kicking in 1st of October. So from now until 1 October, you can please persist with your current process that you've been following. But then from 1st October, those SMFs will also then be coming through as ECTD variations. In fact, that the whole guideline, there will be some changes to the guideline as well, but the whole guideline and all of the other documents we will then be updating, I think in May, so that we can get those ready for publishing also by June.
Perfect. And then my third question is, we have a product, we received the recommendation or the response letter from SAHPRA in the shutdown. But this is a product that we're going to eventually cancel. It's been discontinued already. We've received the last batch. So it's in e-submission format. Now, we've received the recommendation during lockdown. I would just like to request if we could approach SAHPRA to look at how that we continue to address this in e-submission rather than having to do a baseline to finalize the submission and respond.
Yeah, certainly I think it would be good to approach us. We've had another instance, not exactly the same, but as I said, we are always open to evaluate a request on merit and then deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So please do feel free to then send through that request. Internally, we are also accommodating these kinds of requests.
Wonderful. And would I send that to Santhony or to yourself?
So I'm not sure who you would normally deal with if that was like clinical quality, whatever, but it would be the responsible unit that then provided that recommendation. So in order for us to engage that unit that's responsible, I think the previous example I saw was clinical. So whatever unit you need to engage with, please, if you may do so.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Good stuff. And then I think the last one, Jane.
Hi, Christina. Just for my clarification about the baseline, when you submit this baseline, can you take it as an immediate implementation so that you can follow it with 0001 for a variation.
Jane, yes. So what we would want to see is as you are ready to drop your baseline, is that you also drop for us your variation. They can kind of be placed on the SATP at the same time. Just make sure that each of these submissions then have their own little trigger file. But we will pull them in one after the other. So your baseline being 0000, that's the one that system fetches first, pulls it in, and then immediately after that looks for something else. And if the 0001 is then there, it's going to fetch that one as well. So that's how we would like to receive them, is they should actually be baseline and variation coming in together. So you can definitely proceed to submit them to us via SFTP at the same time.
Thank you for the clarification. Thanks.
Okay. Right, so I see we don't have like many hands more left. Let's maybe try and push on until past, colleagues, if you will indulge us. And just take then the last 4 people that have got hands up. Vinay, Lauren, Dale, and Elizabeth. I see that you've got hand up as well. Yeah, okay, let's try. Let's try and see how we do until past. Vinay?
While we are making the submission, number, do we also have to, there is a provision of putting time or minute. So what do we put it, because you're manually creating the submission number? So how do we go about that? In the example, you have given the example as 50, 51, 52. So is it that we just randomly put in some digit because it's being manually created?
Thanks, Vinay. So I'll ask King maybe just to talk to that one, and then I can just follow up or further note that when we have the portal go live, King, if you could maybe just highlight the numbers that will then be generated by the portal going forward, versus the ones that we now need the colleagues to just generate manually or then use the appropriate information.
Hi, Vinay. I will just pop in here. So with the submission number.
I'm sorry, I was answering it. I was
Yes.
muted.
Okay.
Go ahead,
King,
Madeleine,
you
though,
can
please.
go.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. So as explained in the little instruction manual, it's not a random number. It's linked to the date. So you put in date. 24/04/19 is today's date, and the minute 16 of it's now 16 minutes past 2, and you put that little 16 at the end. So that will be your 8-digit number. So again, it's the date, year, month, day, minute. So it's 24/04/1916. That will be your submission number for something now. If you have 2 submissions in one,
it would be 17 now, though.
Then it would be 17 now, and then you can just use following numbers. Yes, there might be applicants that have the same submission number, but that doesn't matter because it only relates to that product within with that specific sequence, that specific application number, and that's what they relate to.
Okay, perfect. So it's when I'm creating the trigger file, whatever the time is in my system, I'll just put in that to be like in that. Perfect.
Yes.
Thanks.
I created this sheet on 24/04/15. If you
creating it just now.
Yeah.
And the second question, I think, which was also, sorry, I think you were saying something, Ken. I think someone was saying something.
No, please carry on.
Yeah, thank you. So my second question is very quick, I think, which was also raised by few people. We have a approved product in South Africa for which we had received a post-approval deficiency during the freeze period. And since this product is a e-submission, it's not an ECTD submission. So while responding, like, should I go for an e-response or do I need to go for a baseline submission?
So Vinay, for the as I think this is the question that a number of colleagues have asked. So where we have recommendations or queries that have been sent during the freeze period, the question at the moment is like, do we need to bring the baseline in, do the original submission and then the response submission, or do we bring in the baseline plus the response only, or do we allow those submissions to just be completed so we can close that activity off and then provide a updated baseline when you next submit a variation? So those are, I think, the three things which internally SAHPRA needs to just ponder around how we can approach this, so that we take a very practical view on this, and then we will revert back as indicated. We'll have an urgent discussion, so I should be able to share an industry communication addressing this by Tuesday of next week. So if you can please just bear with us, that we may liaise with the internal guys. We'll come back to you.
No, definitely. We appreciate the efforts taken by you. So definitely not an issue. We'll wait for the communication from the agency on the further steps ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Lauren?
All your help in that. I just want to find out if e-submission was done for complementary, say, in 2022, will this information be channeled through to the new portal, or do we need to resubmit it as ECTD?
So Lauren, for the ECTD requirements as we've captured them now for the post-freeze and also for the changes come 1 October, these apply to orthodox medicines and biological medicines.
Okay.
So for complementary medicines, veterinary medicines and veterinary medicines, those e-submission guidelines still need to be finalized internally and then published for comment, and that is targeted at this point to come out roughly, oh gosh, Madeleine, I don't know, you need to help me. Did we say end of June? I can't remember.
End of June.
End of June. So
Okay.
so Lauren, yeah, just how can I say, watch this space. We'll be publishing then those ones for review and for comment for e-submissions shortly.
Okay, so then we don't have to submit an e-trigger on the FTP that our information is taken over.
No.
Okay.
So for now, any e-submission as it relates to the complementary medicines, we are not bringing those over into the documents, just orthodox and biologicals.
Okay, so and then if you had, say, ECTDs prior, would you still just do a trigger to take over to channel the information to the portal, or will you guys do that? Then we don't have to do a trigger. The trigger is basically used within this freeze time period.
Yes, so for all of the legacy applications that we have, those have been migrated to the new system. And it's only when you do a new submission, either for a new registration or a variation, that you would need to now include the XML. Yes, and that's for ECTD. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's then maybe take Dale.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. Just two questions regarding the application number. So the products have been previously registered and we previously used the registration number without the classification. Do we need to apply for new application numbers, or is that the standard going forward?
Sorry, is this for a new product that you want to register?
No, not for already registered product.
If you want to do a variation?
Yes, basically we want to submit our ECTD baseline. What do we use for application numbers? Do we apply for a new application number for the already registered product, or do we use the registration number without the classification?
Very good question.
Christina, you used, I got this, you used the registration number without the classification.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So that takes care for one of my issues. The second issue is that we have responses outstanding to recommendations that we submitted in excess of 6 months. Is there a timeline defined so that we know when we can actually do the ECTD baseline?
Dale, those ones, I think, again, I would recommend that we just query the ETA on completing those ones with the responsible units so that you can then make a decision based on whatever feedback they give you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
And then I see we've got, let's go until past, so we've got 6 more minutes to go. Colleagues, if we can take the hand from Elizabeth again, and then Carol, Tuli, Siviwe, and then Julia, and then I think we're going to try and close it off.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask, is the correct assumption, if we haven't had any form of automated response to a submission, a response to queries actually that we submitted on the 16th of April when the portal opened, do we assume that the trigger file was a problem and that the submission hasn't been properly received? Would that be the right assumption?
I'm gonna say yes, but maybe what we can do, Elizabeth, let's rather check. Let's check for you, because we can see them on the SFTP server, and if there was in fact a problem with it, we can just send you then a mail to say, this is the issue, this is what we've picked up, and this is what we need to do to fix it. But certainly I think by now you should have received your message. So if you haven't, then we can then definitely check that for you. Please do feel free to just pop us a mail. And then, as Madeleine says, we can have a look at that and then send the screenshot just to indicate where the challenge was.
So thank you, Christelna. Do I send the mail to you or who to?
Yes, you can. Yeah, I will ask for help internally.
Okay, and may I just ask as a general question, should there be a problem with submission of some sort of a variation or whatever, and there is a problem with transmission, as we may have had in the past, do we resubmit with the same sequence number, or are we supposed to add a -01 or something again, or not? Or do we just stick to just resubmitting as it was?
Please don't do a sequence number as a 4-digit number, should never have a dash, should never have a 1, should never have anything on top of it. So if something is rejected at screening, let's say, and right now because we're still submitting using the 2.1 and we haven't changed anything on the 2.1, it's going through the validation of a 2.1, and the trigger file didn't exist for the 2.1 specification. And so when it goes to the validation, it's not validating the trigger file. But if the trigger file is invalid, what's going to happen starting next week, hopefully towards the end of the week, it will import your submission, but it's going to import it and then tag it as rejected at screening. And at that point in time, it will be in a place where we're going to be able to manage these. There's several comments on the Q&A that have come up and said, you know, I haven't heard anything back. Ideally, you're supposed to be uploading it, and you're supposed to be getting something back within probably 30 minutes for most applications. And when you do get something back, it should be telling you that something is wrong here. If you don't get anything back, and it could very well be that you do get a notification that it passed validation and was uploaded into the system. But when it's uploaded into the system and the system is trying to read the trigger file for all of the metadata that we need to process it, if your trigger file is invalid, then it's going to place it into the rejected and screening area, and you'll get the notification via the process of something that is being rejected in screening. So your question, do you resubmit the same sequence? Yes. If a sequence is rejected, then you will have to submit the new sequence. When 3.0 comes in, though, once the portal is there, we won't have any problems with the trigger files, because the portal will automatically generate them, and we know that they will be generated valid. And the new validation criteria will come in, which will be validating the information that we're providing for the 3.0. So latest by July, everything should be smooth because the portal will be taking care of the trigger file, and latest by October, everything will be super smooth. So right now we're dealing with an old structure, so there will be a little bit of mismatches here and there, and we're trying to fix some of those mismatches and trying to create as little make it as smooth as possible. But please, you will get the notification then that it was rejected in screening, and that you need to please resubmit it and ensure that your trigger file is valid.
So,
Okay, so
let me just come in, Elizabeth. Yeah, so I think if you had a problem where there was network connectivity issues and you see that the file didn't copy across properly, because I think these were the transmission errors that you referred to.
Yeah.
So what sequence of events we would kind of like prescribe to say, look, this is going to get you the best result, is pop down your submission, your application folder first. Make sure that that's properly transmitted, and you can see it there on the SFTP and everything is hunky-dory. And then pop down your XML trigger file, because then you know. The only time we, as Ken says, you know, we were going to go and fetch something is when that XML trigger file is there. But if you first follow the steps of, you know, popping down your application folder, making sure that that was transmitted properly, then you can't go wrong. So if you then pick up like, oh gosh, no, there was a problem here, we had connectivity issues and it didn't copy across, delete that, let's say, half-copied thing, and then copy it again, and then pop down your XML trigger file. So you don't have to put in underscore whatever. It's just you can actually clean it and delete it and make sure that the right copy comes across. We're not going to fetch anything until the XML trigger file is there.
But Christelle and I do want to just kind of point out that if it does come through and it goes into this rejected in screening, we will have a copy of it in our CD pool, and we will have a process in which we need to delete it from the CD pool. Because if they do trigger it before that is deleted, then it'll cause a business error, and it will send a message back that it was rejected because of the business error, and it's because the same sequence is being submitted again. But that is the process still to be determined. We'll talk about that next week, how we can make that as smooth as possible. What we want to do is make sure that the feedback is coming back, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to add something on that we will be able to then validate these trigger files, and I think that's the route that we're going to need to go. We do have an enterprise version of the eValidator, so I'm looking into seeing how we can then create a schema for the trigger, and then be able to create something that will actually validate them.
No, I think that's fine. It's just the question, and I know this has been a historic issue, Kent, was around files not copying fully across. So then it popped out like all sorts of funny little validation errors, and when the guys checked, you know. So I think this is, and then what happens is we had this whole underscore little 001 or whatever thing. So we don't want that anymore. We just want you to rather make sure that everything did copy across before you pop down the XML, and then we know we're all good.
So Christelle, please, can you just clarify then, can that trigger file be uploaded on its own, or does it have to be within the submission as well?
No, look, so I think what we showed is in the application folder, you've got your sequence folder, and then you've got the XML file that needs to go in there. For argument's sake, if the folder with the working documents is there. But what I'm saying is you can put down the application folder and then bring your XML trigger file, clicking then on the application folder and then pasting that below the other two afterwards. Because then at least you are 100% sure that you've had a chance to check, everything is there, it did copy across, you can see all of the numbers tie up, and then you just paste your trigger file and then you're A for away.
Okay, I'm with you. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
No props. Colleagues, then yeah, I think I've really been very cheeky and have overstayed my welcome with you today. So If we then can just confirm that all of the questions that was on the Q&A, we'll revisit those. Make sure that we also then incorporate that in the global Q&A document, and then we'll be publishing that for you for 30th of April. The other commitment is just we're going to have an urgent powwow around these responses that's required for the e-submissions that came during freeze, just to give clear guidance on how we can handle those on a case-by-case basis until such time that we've got those open or pending variations just closed off nicely. So that we'll share with you on Tuesday. Right, perfect. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and we will try and set up another session for May. I think specifically when we just want to deal with how variations need to be compiled and what this looks like in version 3.0. So we'll make sure that we engage with you in May for that. Thanks everyone. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend.